The semi-supine is where you're lying on your back and your knees are bent. I mean, that's simply what it means. And we choose this position because it's really lovely in the body, your body, on the whole, most people's bodies like semi-supine. We recommend that you place your head on something fairly firm, like maybe soft back books, paperback books, or maybe a block not too high. Well, it depends on your neck. You don't want to feel as if your chin is pressing into your chest, and you don't want to feel as if you're looking backwards and up towards sort of behind you. It's the support under your head is for your own comfort, is to keep the head in balance. And the feet, your semi-supine feet, they want to be a little bit further, a little bit away from your bum and a little bit away from each other. So that's so that the backs of your knees are a bit free. But again, you want to be comfortable. It's not a precise science. It really isn't. And if you've been doing this for quite a while, if this is not your first rodeo, then I would also say to you, question where your feet are. So if you, like me, get into semi-supine most days, just because this is how you've always positioned your feet doesn't mean to say that this is how your feet want to be positioned today. So, you know, maybe they want a little bit more width between them. Maybe your toes would be more easy on the hips if your toes are pointing outwards a little bit. Maybe for you, it's more comfortable with your toes pointing very in balance, you know, sort of parallel. See, I think I'm still in the fight flight energy because the words are not flowing quite as well as usual. So let's just think about that for a moment. So what happens when when that fight flight energy comes and overtakes us? One of the first things that happens in your musculature is that your neck tightens, the jaw grips. There's a hardening of the muscles around the tongue and the throat. So if we're going to look at reversing that, we're going to send a little message. You're going to think, you're going to send a message of thought to your tongue and say, I want my tongue to rest in my mouth, wherever it rests, and I'd like that tongue to be soft. And there we are, just asking for that, simple to start with. You also want to be asking the jaw to release. And it might be that actually you're thinking more about the hinge of the jaw, so the front of your ear, being aware of sort of just in front of your right ear, asking for something to let go there, asking for something to be a bit easy in the front of the other side of you as well, the left ear, the right ear. Your teeth want to have space between them so that they're not clamped together, no gritting the teeth. And there wants to be a sort of an awareness that if you could move your head, you could. And this is where it becomes quite interesting, because what we'll often do is tighten through the base of the back of the skull. So you've got some really good sensory feedback going on here. You've got a bit of proprioception because your head is on a firm surface, and that's why we use the books rather than a cushion. If using books to rest your head on is too much, then you know a soft, fairly firm cushion can work, or even folding up a bit of a towel or something to put between your skull and the books for comfort. I'm all for comfort. So here we all are, lying in semi-supine with our feet placed on the ground and our head resting on a support of some kind, and your eyes are open. Now, they're probably not, because it's very instinctual to say, oh, I'm just going to lie down. Lovely, close the eyes, let's all nod off. But this isn't really a nodding off sort of practice. It's more of a conscious organizing yourself practice. So if you can open your eyes and just not moving your head, but just your eyes, look around the place. What have you got there? A bit of a ceiling, maybe some cobwebs. If it's my house, you'd have a lot of cracks in the ceiling. letting the eyes be free. So that's another area that happens, you know, if we get sent into that fight flight energy, there's a hardening of the muscles all the way around the eyes. So you're going to send a message to your face. You're going to say to those eyes, I let my eyes rest within my head. And as you're looking up at your ceiling, know where you are. Know that you're inside your head. You're there in your own body, looking out, observing, knowing your environment. And then I'm going to ask you to bring your awareness back to your neck, back to the base of the skull. And we're going to ask for the base of the back of the skull to widen. It's sort of a thinking of a smile across the base of the back of the skull from ear to ear. And this is a thinking technique. It's a wishing, a wanting. You're sending a thought there. You're actually organizing, laying down neurological pathways, but we're not going to dive into all of that right now. We're just going to accept that the thought that you have is going to affect your body. And I would like you to think the base of your skull to widen. I'd then like you to ask the muscles down the side of your neck, from your ear down through to your shoulder on each side, to relax a bit. They don't need to work as hard as they have been because your head is supported. You can allow the neck to be free. And that's something that we think a lot of in this work, allowing the neck to be free. So we're switching off, we're sending a message in that moment. When you relax your neck a bit, when you free off around the base of the back of your skull, you're sending a message back to your brain to say, it's okay, there's no drama here, there's no panic. We're all fine, we're lying on the floor and everything's great. I'd like you now to take your awareness down to the small of your back, your lumbosacral junction, to be sort of precise, but you know, somewhere generally at the small of the back, where the last bits of movable spine meet the pelvis, the sacrum, that's fused part of your spine. Ask for the small of your back to release, a kind of freeing off and a letting go. Again, it's just a thought. If you want to release the base of the spine around the lower back, you'll need to soften in your belly. You'll actually just need to ask your belly to let go. Don't grip it, don't tighten it. Send that message, because it is just a thought. I'll ask my belly to soften. And whilst letting your belly soften, you could ask your back to widen at the same time. And that's a nice sort of little mantra, soft belly, wide back. And what we're talking about when we talk about a wide back in this work is we're saying that we don't want to squeeze ourselves inwards. We don't want to narrow. We don't want the muscles around the lower ribs to be gripping and tightening. How are your lower ribs? How much do we think about them? Well, if you do this regularly, you'll be thinking about your lower ribs all the time because, well, I just go on about them, don't I? All the time. So I would like you to think of your lower back ribs as they come off the sides of the spine and sweep around the sides of you and come on up to join in that costal arch, the front open part of the ribs. There you are, thinking about the lower ribs, mapping them in your mind. And then you're going to send a message. You're going to say, oh, well, I don't want to grip all the way around there. I don't want to hang on to those lower ribs, especially the lower back ribs, asking them to be free. And what you might notice as you ask for the lower back ribs to release is that your breathing becomes a little bit easier because, of course, that's where the lungs are, in your rib cage. You don't need to do any big fancy breathing, no sort of heaving and huffing and puffing. but simply allowing for a freedom around your cylindrical rib cage is enough to free up the ribs so that the lungs can fill and empty in their own lovely rhythmic way. Say hello to your feet, just with your mind. Let's join up things a little bit. Say hello to your left foot, the sole of it on the ground, and say hello to the right foot. I'm hoping that you're either in socks or just soft slippers, soft shoes, so that you've got a bit of wriggle room around your toes, and you can let them move. You don't have to do anything with them, really. We just want to be aware of them. Your left little toe and your left big toe. Just, I'd like you to know where that is using your mind. That's all, really. And you're going to ask for a sort of broadening across the base of the toes from that left little toe to the right big toe, so that you can really become aware of your foot on the ground. You're aware of the ground, the support, the safety of the ground. And then you're going to take your awareness over to your right foot and say hello to the little toe on the right foot. And take your mind across to the big toe on the right foot and ask for that broadening, that spreading of the feet. Just thinking that they're enormous, as if you're wearing, I don't know, huge clown shoes or something like that. Great big grounding, connecting feet. And then from your feet, I'd like you to think your way up through your shins, sort of following a path up through the shins, up to your knees, where you're going to ask to be easy in the knees. And that means not gripping the backs of your knees. It also means that if your thighs feel like they're working quite hard to keep you in this semi-supine position, there might need to be a small adjustment. You might fancy just testing that and just letting the knees rock from side to side a millimetre or two. If it's very hard work keeping your legs in this parallel semi-supine position, then you could lean your knees to rest in on each other, taking some of the strain off. The goal is that we allow enough tone through the legs and enough ease through the legs so that the thighs are pretty much parallel. But sometimes that's a bit of a work in progress, and, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say. At the other end of your legs is your pelvis. At the top of your legs, there's your pelvis, and it's heavy and it's resting on the ground. And we're going to pay it some attention by going back to that small of your back, that lumbosacral junction. See if you can let something release there, or in fact anywhere around the back of the pelvis. A sort of easing and not hanging on and not tightening. And remember that it is very strongly connected to the belly, so you'd be wise to say to yourself, I'll let my belly be soft and I'll allow a sort of broadening feeling through the pelvis. Of course, it is just bones that, you know, the pelvic girdle is made up of bones, and there's not a lot of broadening that's going to happen there. But what will happen is a level of appropriate tone within your pelvis, especially the pelvic floor. So we spend a lot of time thinking of width through the pelvis. Sometimes that's a bit hard to get your head round. It's a bit sort of a challenge to sort of get your head round. That's the word, really. To think it, to become aware of what's going on in the pelvis. But at the very bottom of your pelvis, you've got two bones called your, oh God, they're called your ischial tuberosities, but we'll just call them the sit bones, and they're your bum bones. They're at the very bottom of your pelvis. And if you were to think one away from the other, left to the left and right to the right, you're creating a bit of a sense of tone and widening through the pelvis, widening through the seat, if you've ever been a rider. If you have leant your knees on each other, have a little experiment now and see if they can come back to parallel, just sort of allowing that experiment to be just yours. It doesn't matter if your legs don't want to come back to parallel. Try it out and let the knees rest back on each other if that's not a go for you yet. And then right up at the tops of your thighs, where your thighs meet your pelvis, I want you to ask for a bit of ease, as if you were relaxing the backs of your upper thighs right up near those sit bones, right up near your pelvis. And in that same way, we're relaxing that whole area into width, a broadening through your base. So here you are lying on the floor with your head supported by some soft back books and your knees bent and your feet on the ground. Probably the whole of your back isn't in contact with the floor. There's probably little bits of it, like perhaps part of the shoulder girdles pulled away from the ground, or maybe the lower back doesn't feel settled into the ground. Maybe that's pulled up off away from it because of your lumbar curve, because of the shape of you. And I'm just going to clarify that that's okay, because we are all different shapes. But what we do want is we want that rectangular back, that from your shoulders all the way down to your sit bones, we want it to be relaxing into length and width. We want you to take your space. My teacher used to say to me, Gemma, you're not very big. You may as well take your space. And I love that as an idea. So become aware of the whole of your back, as much of it as you can, from the sit bones through to the sides of your hips, up through the side of your body, the left-hand side up through to your left armpit, the right-hand side of the torso up through to the right armpit. And notice as you become aware of that rectangular sheet of connective tissue that is your back, whether your breathing can be a little bit easier. Almost as if those lower back ribs are free enough to release into width as your breath comes in. And easy enough so that they spring back again as the breath leaves the body. And I always like to remind people that unless you have a cold, you want to be breathing through your nose. The lips want to be softly closed, if that works for your teeth arrangement. The tongue wants to be resting quietly and softly in the mouth, wherever that is for you. And you want to be asking again for a little bit of ease at the hinge of the jaw. Not gripping, not tightening, not hanging on. So the weight of your head is surprisingly heavy, not just yours, everyone's. And those neck muscles can sometimes switch on a little bit too busily through the day, trying to hold it up. So I'd like you just to say to yourself, it's okay, my head is resting on these books, these blocks, whatever your head is on. It's all right, neck muscles, you can take a break, you can do less. Find a bit of ease in your neck, just ask for it. Maybe for you the tension isn't at the back, maybe it's at the front, maybe it will be useful to ask for some softening from under your chin, down through the front of your neck to your collarbones. And when you get down the front of the neck and to the collarbones, you can ask again for a bit of ease, as if you were letting the chest muscles soften. And those chest muscles soften all the way across to your armpits. Letting go in your armpits is one of the most useful things you can do for yourself, for your head-neck-back relationship, for ease within your arms, and for your breathing as well. You could almost imagine that there was space under your armpits, much more than there really is. You don't need lots of space under your armpits. You don't need to move your arms anywhere special. They can be wherever they are, wherever's comfortable. Some people like to lie them by themselves, by their sides on the floor. Other people like to just place the hands palm down somewhere on the abdomen. Where's comfortable for your arms? Do ask them. And wherever your arms are resting, ask those armpits to release, to ungrip. And almost imagine that the elbows are dropping back into the ground, back and down towards your hips. Don't push them, don't do anything with them. It's not a doing technique, it's the complete opposite. It's a not doing. So we could say, don't tighten in the crook of the arm. Don't grip your hands. Release your wrists. I find often in this work that the tension in the shoulder girdle and the upper arms ends up with a kind of disconnect for the arms, that they feel like they're all on their own, that they're not at all supported by the back. So I really like to think about a length from your elbows, from those resting elbows, thinking of a length up through the upper arm bones, up towards the tops of the arms. And then from there, connecting them right across to somewhere in your spine. If you were thinking about the bones, you'd go from the elbow joint up through the upper arm bone and all the way through along the collarbones to the base of the front of your neck. But it might not make sense in your body. You might be more about the muscles today, and you might think to yourself, actually, it makes more sense to me to think up through the backs of my arms, up through the backs of my free armpits, and across the shoulder blades, and all of that musculature that joins there through the base of the back of the neck. As you're thinking your arms back into your body, as you're reconnecting your arms to your spine, to your body, have another little thought about your breathing, your easy rib cage. And perhaps notice whether the back of your rib cage, right up under your shoulder blades, could freely move with your next breath. No fancy breathing required, just an awareness of movement and ease in the upper back so that the ribs can move freely. So I'm feeling much less fight-flighty. I'm feeling much more rest and digest. And I'm hoping you are too. Another really lovely thing that can be done if you are unfortunate enough to get thrown into your fight-flight is to allow that rocking through the pelvis and the knees. We did a tiny bit at the beginning, and in a moment it's going to be sort of towards the end of our session here. So I would always recommend giving a little bit of attention to telling your body that you're going to move it soon. And a lovely thing to do is to let the knees rock from side to side. Not too far, not too quickly, but gentle rhythmic rocking. And that gentle rhythmic rocking is something that will really soothe the nervous system. We love rocking, whether we're sat on a chair, rocking forwards and backwards or side to side, whether we're just letting our knees and our pelvis rock from side to side. It calms us, it eases us, it brings us back home a little bit. And if you're feeling that it's time for you to get up now, and it is nearly the end of the session, then you'll want to sort of rock and roll a little bit until you roll on your side. And then it's getting up from the side. It's the kindest thing for most people, for your neck muscles, for everything. If you've been doing this a while and you just think, no, Gemma, this wasn't long enough and I'm going to stay here, then you just stay there. Also, if you've fallen asleep, you'll just stay there, and that's fine too. But if you have come up to sitting and you've just got your bum on the floor, because of course we're all on the floor basically, be aware of that pelvis and the weight of it just now in your sitting position. Don't rush if you're all just staying on the floor, that's fine too. Be aware of the pelvis being a bowl. It is literally a bowl shape that can rock forwards and backwards. And if you're on your sit bones, those are the last two bones of the pelvis, they're designed for rocking. They're kind of like little rockers on the bottom of us. As well as being aware of your pelvis, I'd like you just to be aware of those ribs, the lower back ribs, and that whole of the back of the rib cage, the side of the rib cage, and the idea that that's where we're breathing. That's where the expansion needs to be, the movement. Breathing into the back, breathing into the back of you. And then ungrip your armpits, because they don't need to hang on. Soften your tongue, let it rest in the mouth. And I'm just going to add that taking all of this feeling that you have now, that kind of ease within your body, into your world, into your everyday life, whatever you're going to do next, go and chop some vegetables, go and sit and watch some television, whatever it is. The more you practice this, the more you get on the floor and think in this quiet, organized space, the quicker that is, the easier it is to get yourself out of that fight flight into your rest and digest. It's taken me less than half an hour, and here I am, all back to normal.